Story of my life. I've, 51M, had a messed up yet blessed life. I am currently struggling with where I'm at. Age 1 to 10 was a pretty normal suburban lower middle class existence. Lots of love in the home and no major drama. At age 10, my dad died. Cancer from Agent Orange exposure in Vietnam. My mom was never the same again. She spoiled me rotten. That was a mistake, but she was doing her best. I was still pretty normal but pretty sad and somewhat damaged. When I was 15, my mom developed cancer. At that point, I figured she was going to be dead, and I acted out a lot. Just a few months before she died, I was arrested and charged with 7 felonies and 4 misdemeanors, and that was just the stuff they could prove. I was eventually convicted of 1 felony, plea bargain, and given a massive amount of community service and probation. Had my mom not been sick, I would have gone to juvenile hall. Meanwhile, my mom was going through chemotherapy, and it was going well. One night, she walked into the kitchen, had a stroke, and ended up in the hospital and home hospice until she died a couple of months later. I never had another conversation with her again after that night. She was cremated. The day my grandfather picked up her ashes, he told me her death was my fault. I just existed for a couple of years after that. I stopped breaking the law, mostly, and just tried my hardest to have a normal life. Despite that, I did manage to get myself expelled from school. Right after my 18th birthday, I started dating a girl that was my dream, I thought. Eventually, she got pregnant, and we got married and became parents not too long after. I got my GED and joined the Marine Corps. I went to boot camp knowing I had warrants for my arrest, and the recruiter knew too. The warrants were for failure to appear con traffic tickets. The recruiter told me I could pay the fines after boot camp. I don't know how, but during boot camp, they found out I had warrants. Long story short, I was given an entry-level separation and sent home. I decided that I should probably try and find a career with a lot of student loans and help from my grandparents. I enrolled in college. It took a lot of work, but I got myself together and graduated with a degree in computer science. I was the first person in my bloodline to ever earn a college degree. I then went on to work as a software engineer and still do to this day. The next 15 or so years progressed pretty normally. Work, family, etc. However, there was one negative aspect. In the second year of our marriage, my wife cheated on me with 2 different men. I wasn't mentally healthy enough to end the marriage, I should have. Instead, I cheated on her for many, many years. I deeply regret that. Finally, about 15 years into the marriage, I stopped cheating and put effort into my marriage. Eventually, our daughter went away to college, and things between us got bad. Not long before our 20th anniversary, I asked for a divorce. After the divorce, I worked on myself and started contemplating the type of woman I wanted to be with. Turns out, I was already friends with her. I realized she was what I wanted and asked her on a date. Almost immediately, we were inseparable and feel deeply in love. She was everything I had ever wanted. I already had a daughter over 20 years old, but the new woman wanted kids more than anything. I delayed rushing into another marriage but eventually proposed, and 3 years after we met, we married. We went on to have a girl and a boy, now aged 9 and 6. Our marriage was pretty good. It had kid chaos, typical, and we did bicker a lot. That just seemed to be our dynamic. In the last 2 years of our marriage, I seriously dropped the ball. Her dad died, and I wasn't supportive. Turns out it resurfaced a lot of the childhood trauma I hadn't dealt with, and then almost a year later, she was seriously injured and could have died. Rather than showing how I really felt, I guarded myself in those emotions with harshness and blamed her for her accident. About 5 months later, she asked for a divorce. That was almost 2 years ago. She bought a house in a new neighborhood, and about 6 months later, I also bought a house in the same neighborhood. I literally live 1 minute away, by car. We've had a lot of ups and downs since then. She has a lot of resentment toward me, and I've been extremely jealous of her dating. Despite this, we typically text and/or talk on the phone multiple times a day. Of course, some of it is about the kids but not all. We also hang out frequently. Since being divorced, we have also had sex several times. July was the last time. She's admitted that she still has feelings for me, is attracted to me, that we click, in all ways, that I'm her best friend and that she loves me, though she makes a point of saying she's not in love with me. I've worked really hard on fixing all the more questionable aspects of myself, and I am a very different person than I was. I've also become much closer with the kids. Despite all this, she decided to become exclusive with the guy she was dating a couple weeks after we had sex, which was probably the best sex we ever had, and now she has a boyfriend. Almost 2 weeks ago, 6 weeks after they became exclusive, she told me she's in love with him. Yesterday, she met his daughters. I sit here on her couch writing this as I watch football with our son. I'm deeply in love with her and understand exactly what I did to harm our marriage. I've sincerely apologized and worked on myself. I want her back more than anything, but she states that we'll never be together again. I'm crushed. I dream about her every night. I think about her with nearly every waking thought. If it wasn't for the kids, I'd end my life. I think about that every day, too. I just can't do that to the kids. So, here I sit in somewhat self-imposed purgatory. I hope and pray that her relationship with this guy doesn't last, and she sees the new, real me in the aftermath. Only time will tell. Obviously, there are about 1,000,000 details of left out. If you are curious about something, just ask. Thanks for reading my story. My infant baby passed away. I, F20, found out that I was pregnant with my daughter Sophia when I was 18. It was a hard pregnancy mentally and I didn't really know how I felt about the pregnancy to begin with. Her dad and I were constantly arguing and it left me feeling small and insecure within myself and my relationship. As for my daughter, she seemed super healthy at all of my OB/GYN appointments. It wasn't until she was born did anyone find out she was born with multiple rare heart defects. These defects were caused by a rare genetic mutation called DiGeorge syndrome. I can't go too deep into what that is because I can barely comprehend what that was myself. All I understood was that she could not cry nor eat like a baby with a healthy heart could. Anything that can raise her heartbeat levels could be possibly fatal to her and cause her to go through a cardiac arrest. For 4 weeks my daughter was in the hospital before her cardiology team had told me and my boyfriend, now husband, that our daughter had to go upstate to Stanford for a very specific heart surgery that she needed in order to survive. I was nervous to have her be taken in a separate plane than to Stanford, but I complied since it seemed like it was the best thing to do for her at the time. I went up to Stanford the next day and my grandmother came with me, so I wasn't up there alone. Everything was looking to be very good and my daughter was already being prepped for her surgery for the next morning. Doctors came into the room where I was holding my baby girl and explained how her surgery was going to be and explained all the risks. I signed every consent form that was given to me. I did not care, I just wanted my baby to be happy and healthy. Once her pre-physical for the surgery was done, I kissed my daughter and informed the nurses in charge of my daughter that my grandmother and myself would be leaving to go to a nice lunch out of the hospital. We had been in the Stanford hospital for about 3 days and my grandmother thought it would be best for me to get out of the hospital for a little while. We got to the mall nearby that was about a 10-minute drive, and right when we sat down to order food I got a call from the head doctor that was on my daughter's medical team. She had said that something had gone wrong and I was needed back at the hospital ASAP because my daughter's case was now deemed an emergency. My daughter had suffered from a cardiac arrest and any efforts to help revive her from it was proving to be futile. By the time I had finally reached my daughter's hospital room, there was a swarm of nurses and doctors talking and handing things to each other. I was pulled to the side of the room where my baby girl's head health doctor and the emergency surgery doctor were waiting for me. They had told me my daughter had suffered from a heart attack and was being put on life support. She had gone 45 minutes without proper oxygen levels to her brain, causing her to essentially go brain dead. I lost it. I screamed the scariest cry I have ever heard in my life. Everything else was a blur. I tried to move but my legs felt like they were locked to the ground I was standing on. I barely remember anything else for the next few days. I allowed everything around me to happen and I didn't stop anything. Family came up to Stanford from both sides of the family to meet her and be there to support. It wasn't until 3 days after my baby was put on life support did her dad and I decide to take her off and let her go. It hurt and I couldn't handle seeing my daughter on her deathbed alone. But on the last night my daughter was alive, I finally gathered the courage to see my daughter by myself after assuring family members to see her all day. The nurse taking care of her that night was so sweet and I will never forget her kindness. She helped me with getting comfortable and positioning my daughter in a way she would be most comfortable while I held her. The nurse left and after 10 minutes of me holding her my daughter took her final breath and I felt her body go limp. I sat there silently screaming until an actual noise came out of my mouth. Her nurse had heard my cry and came in. She checked my daughter's pulse where she found none. My daughter's funeral came shortly after. It was a beautiful ceremony and so many people came and helped me out with paying for the affair. I honestly don't remember crying a lot that day. I just knew that was the last time I would ever make an event for her, so I conducted myself the best way I can. Her dad and I went through a lot after her funeral. He almost went down a path of alcohol and I became so bitter after her death, but somehow we made it through. At least that's what I like to think. Of course I still struggle till this day because of it all and it honestly traumatized me enough to be hesitant on having another baby, but I am sure I will be willing to try again sometime in the late future. I just hope my daughter is happy wherever she is. Tony's no good, awful, very bad shift. I used to clean washrooms at a zoo as my first job. About 6 guys and 6 girls in the crew to cover a few different buildings' washrooms. One day Tony had a series of smallish one-off bad luck situations that years later makes me smile. It starts with him coming back from lunch break. He was heading down to station himself at the furthest away washroom, but as we all did, stopped in for a minute at each washroom to check on the boys and see what's up before moving on. I'm at his first stop working with another dude. He arrives just in time to help us clean up an explodey diaper on the change table. Gross. But he moves on afterwards to the next stop. At this washroom, the storage room was divided completely in two by a shelving unit for our spray bottles, air freshener, etc. So there were 2 separate doors for us and the girls to each access from our own side. This room also lacked a utility sink, which meant our mop water tended to get extra gross during the day before we were able to lug it to a toilet and flush it down. Can't do that with guests around. The mop bucket is on the boys' side of the shelf on the floor. Tony had left his water bottle on this shelf before lunch, and while he's talking to Chelsea, who's standing on her side restocking, she accidentally knocks his bottle off the shelf and into the gnarly old mop water. Forever unclean. But he moves on to the next, and last washroom. On his way he gets shit on by a seagull. Supposedly good luck, but I think we'll all agree this did not add to his day. Tony finally gets to his washroom and rewards himself by taking an on-the-clock shit on a mint clean bonus of being in washroom's toilet. This washroom was the last one on site that hadn't been updated. Some very weak plumbing involved here, and the size of Tony's deposit is enough to overpower it. Clogged. He goes to storage, grabs the plunger and has it, snapping the wooden handle rather quickly. So Tony now has to recover the poopy plunger head and figure out a way to unclog this stall. The silver lining to this part is that we figured out we can unscrew the long squeegee handle and attach it to the plunger. Emperor Plunge, as we called this beautiful monstrosity, lasted for years, always catching eyes whenever it was brought out into a washroom to effortlessly clear a clog. God bless you, Tony. What should I do? In high school I used to hook up with this chick that was on the girls' wrestling team for the school while I was the star male wrestler for the school. We used to do things before practice and anytime after school in my car, seldom on weekends. To be absolutely clear, she has initiated everything pretty much every single time, typically through a "meet me at so and so" type of text, followed by a "that was fun. Let's do it again sometime." For context, I was a young senior. I didn't turn 18 until a month after graduating, while she was an older sophomore, 16, IDK how something with birthdays. After graduation, we never really talked much. I went off to college for a year, but ended up leaving after the school year to pursue business and do online schooling, which is a whole other story in itself. Well, I'm 19 now, going into my second year of college online, and she's now an 18 years old senior. To be clear again, we have not done anything in the time from me being of age and her being underage. Now we're both of legal age and we've been in contact over text. I heard she had a boyfriend through the grapevine but had absolutely no idea who the guy was. She tells me about him but still flirts with me, which is crazy lol. Long story short, my old coach found out I was back in town and offered me an assistant coaching position at the school. Of course I picked it up. I love coaching. He has me coaching both the elementary and middle school kids, as well as the HS cats twice a week. Every time I go in, she flirts with me and says we should go grab Slurpees or go on a late night drive. Which has led to things in the past. But here's the kicker, I found out her boyfriend is one of the guys on the team whom I coach. He's younger and she's 18. First of all, props to him, but now I have a predicament. I have yet to sign papers as a coach, so there's technically nothing legally wrong with me tapping that RQ, but ethically I'm pretty sure this is all bad. Not to mention, if he finds out, I can definitely get in trouble if he were to snitch to the school. Also, he's a cool guy, so I might just tell him what his GF been saying to me. What does Reddit think I should do?